Yes, today the Don is fully dressed because today the Don means DC business. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I am Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends, wives, and especially your boyfriends and your husbands. A very warm welcome to Wednesday's edition of the DCU Daily. You can follow me on X Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X, on TikTok Mad Mickey's World, and on Snapchat BMouth60. So welcome to Wednesday's edition of the DCU Daily. Today we're going to do something rather different, totally focusing on the DCU and Superman and a little bit of DCEU chat. Do you remember the DCEU Daily I used to do? Boy, I miss those days, and I think a lot of you do too. We're going to read 3 screenrant articles about the DCU. It's very interesting to read these articles. Some are pushing propaganda of a successful Superman movie. One talks about the fights in Man of Steel and in Superman, and the fights in Man of Steel being more realistic. And we're going to talk about, as well, dark storytelling versus light storytelling. Should it be one or the other in comic book movies, or is there a place for both? I think there's a place for both. I think you can have dark and light in one movie, but that's just me. So let's get into this. James Gunn's Superman breaks 70-year MCU box office streak, proving DC is on the right track. Now, for many of us, this will enrage us. This is rage bait. This is rage bait. I don't believe that James Gunn's DCU is on the right track. I don't think Superman is a great movie. There are some good things in that movie. Just before we continue, there's a moment when Lois Lane tells Clark, "You think everyone is beautiful." That's true with Superman. There's that naivete that he can even turn the dark into light. In Smallville, for many, many years, he tries with Lex. He can see there's darkness in Lex, but Jonathan Kent goes, "Reject him, he's dangerous, keep away from the loofahs." And Clark goes, "If I turn my back on Lex, then we're going to turn him into exactly what you say he is." So that's interesting. So that's Clark. He sees everything as beautiful and everything with the potential of being beautiful. I thought I'd mention that because, as I say, there are some interesting things in that movie, but consistently, it's not a great movie, and there's a lot of problematic things about that movie. So anyway, we can see here that they've gone in with this title, trying to find what they do. They stat pad. They try and find a stat, and they creatively calculate it to make it look good for Gunn, this movie, and the DCU. And they've been doing it from the moment the movie has been released. As I say, as far as I'm concerned, this is just rage bait. But let's get into it. The new Superman movie is posting strong numbers at the box office, with the DC Universe's first film now on track to break a major Marvel Cinematic Universe box office trend that has been going on for several years before release. There was a lot of talk about how the future of DC hinged on James Gunn's Superman being successful. While this is partly true, Gunn has stated that Superman is not the project that will make or break the DCU. Now, he's right. Like Man of Steel, because Man of Steel's box office wasn't enough, really. Well, WB weren't happy with it. That's why they fired David Goyer. The moment they ruined the DCEU, and it was doomed to fail, was when they fired David Goyer. They were reacting. I think that Zaslav probably told Gunn, whatever happens with this movie, we're going to go on with your plan. We believe in you. I think it's a bit of a mistake, but there you go. So, that will not make, so basically, it's not the project that will make or break the DCU. Still, starting a new shared universe with a strong statement like the Man of Steel's movie is doing beats the alternative. Taking the Superman movie's budget, which is reportedly set at $225 million, into account, its break-even point emerges. Superman would have to finish its global box office run with 450 to 562.2 million to break even. Isn't it interesting? We've all suddenly become box office analysts and experts, trying to guess what's a break-even point? Now, to me, a break-even means, let's talk about that for a brief moment, means that they got their money back and then they can begin to make a profit. So Superman has made a brief profit, a small profit, but not the profit they would have wanted. The same with Man of Steel. That's what's interesting about both Superman movies. Both of them are pretty much ended up in the same situation. Although Man of Steel has clearly made more, whether you adjust for inflation or not, Man of Steel's figure isn't really anything to crow about either, but neither is Superman's, with finishing less. Because if Man of Steel wasn't good enough for WB, what does that say for the 625 that Superman has made, or that will ultimately finish up at? Anyway, anything after that would guarantee a profit for Gunn and DC Studios. But for studios, it's not just about a profit, it's about a huge profit. Because this isn't a small movie. They didn't make this movie to make 625. They made this movie to make 750 or make 850, at the very least. And it was very quickly apparent to them that this wasn't going to happen. That's why they started doubling down and coping even before the movie was released. Superman's box office is, so basically, yeah. So while the movie inches ever closer to the high end of that projection, Superman's box office is now looking at an even more important feat, giving DC a victory over Marvel. So let's read this. While the MCU's movies are struggling at the box office in 2025, true, DC has had a different year. Sure, there might only be one DC movie in 2025, but Superman is the first cinematic entry in the franchise. And it had to perform to break away from the negative image of the scrapped DCEU. But why did the DCEU have a negative image? Number one, because Feige, the MCU, Marvel Studios and Disney were putting out bots online to be negative about it, and it worked. Access Media were being negative about it. Who was behind that? Because when you look at Snyder's movies, as I've said before, you can't look at them and say they're bad movies. That's fucking insane. But anyway, to that end, it worked well. At the time of writing, James Gunn's Superman movie is flying high with 559.3 million. We now know it's over 600 million, right? Given its budget, Superman is going to pass the high end of its 450 to 462.2 million break-even point soon. With anything the movie does at the box office after that counting as profit, doesn't matter, not the profit they want. For DC Studios, Superman just passed Jurassic World Rebirth's domestic box office. This was another blag they were trying. We've been through this again and again. They were focusing on a more positive domestic box office while ignoring the international. Now they've all woken up and they're talking about the international. We spoke the other day about the shrinkage of Hollywood movies internationally. Because now, internationally, people see Hollywood movies for what they are. Sludge, cack, and not worth spending your fucking money on. This shows that Superman is well on its way to being one of 2025's biggest movies, which isn't saying a lot. And the DC entry is now projected to end the year as 2025's highest grossing superhero movie. Considering the other superhero movies we've had, that doesn't really say much, does it? Superman has already outgrossed Captain America, Brave New World and Thunderbolts, which doesn't matter, right? Because those movies were flops. Projected to end its run with 640 to 700 million. This is so funny. This is so funny because we know that Superman isn't going to finish from 640 to 700 million. If it's lucky, it's going to finish at 624, 625. They kept on projecting the 700 million because they knew that would be more than Man of Steel. How does that feel? You lost. With Superman on the way to ruling the superhero movie box office, look at the way they do it. They're experts. In 2025, this will mark the first time that DC has done so since 2008, the year the MCU started with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. While Marvel's studio franchise was only beginning, Christopher Nolan's directed one of the best superhero movies of all time. The Dark Knight. Grossed $1 billion. Every year since then, which saw the MCU movies release in theatres, has had a Marvel entry as the highest grossing superhero movie of the year. DC even had strong contenders throughout that run, with Jason Momoa's Aquaman, which grossed $1.15 billion, losing to Avengers Infinity Wars. How can you compare a solo standalone Aquaman movie to Avengers Infinity Wars? $2.048 billion. How can you compare it? You're not real fucking people. Anyway, so basically they're doing that to try and dumb down what the DCEU achieved with Aquaman. That's what they're doing, right? Another major DC release, Joker, lost... Listen to this! Listen to this! Another major DC release, Joker, lost to Avengers Endgame despite breaking $1 billion. Why are you comparing Joker, an indie type of cheap movie made for under... You know what's funny? I would probably say that Joker made a bigger profit than Avengers Endgame. Imagine how much that fucking movie cost to make. Imagine how much it costs to pay Robert Downey Jr. in the first place. But anyway, this is just bollocks to make Gunn's Superman sound more profitable. While Superman's fate has yet to be confirmed, the Fantastic Four's first steps, presenting a major second weekend drop, with its legs failing to match the Man of Steel's, makes it nearly impossible for the MCU movie to turn things around. DC will finally top the yearly superhero box office. However, Marvel should soon take that record back. It's all very, very interesting, isn't it? Because in a crap era of Marvel movies, you're shying off about DC getting a victory from a film that's barely going to make a profit. That's very interesting to me. But screenrant ain't finished yet, everyone. After the Superman movie ending debut, Millie Alcock's Supergirl, the hero, will take the skies in a solo movie next year. Boosted by Superman's performance, what a joke this is, Supergirl could do well at the box office. DC's other 2026 theatrical release is Clayface. Now, I've spoke about Supergirl and Clayface. They have potential, especially because they're not made by Gunn, but he's still directing the directors, which is very, very interesting. And in fact, there's apparently the Gotham City logo in Clayface is similar to the one Matt Reeves used. Again, you know, his Batman merging with the DCU rumours have started again. We'll see what happens. But we're at the point where there may never be a DCU Batman. Let that sink in for a minute. Anyway, so yeah, Clayface, an R-rated Batman villain horror movie, which is not expected to have the same wide appeal as Supergirl. But Joker wasn't supposed to have wide appeal, but it did. So we'll see. Despite Superman's DC connections, setting up Supergirl for success in 2026, the highest grossing superhero movie will most likely come from the MCU. Marvel Studios will release 2 entries from its biggest franchise, with Spider-Man Brand New Day in July and Avengers Doomsday in December, while the MCU should get its record back soon. Superman's feat is still encouraging for DC's future. I mean, I almost should have had some canned laughter while I was reading this. This is funny, but we did discuss in a video the other day the potential of Supergirl and Clayface to compete with Spider-Man Brand New Day and the new Avengers movie, because the MCU hasn't got a great reputation, and there's a lot of fans that are very cynical about the new Russo Avengers directed movies. So we'll see what happens there. But they're calling this a major success. It's not. As I say, 600 million plus box office should not be sniffed at. But when you're a Superman movie, you've got to reach for the skies, not the floor. Here's another Screen Rant article about James Gunn's future DCU plans by Andy Burbatt, or whatever his name is. Now, I remember I slaughtered this guy so many times because he's a bit of a shill, right? He's very much for the bright and colourful, right? He never questions these people or anything. And I remember saying something, he said something that I agreed with on Twitter, and then he goes, aren't you the guy who slaughtered me on YouTube? Yes, I was. But you can also disagree with someone, slaughter them, and then agree with them, Andy. I think he's blocked me now because he's too precious. He probably lives in California. That's why. But that's okay, Andy. I'm sure you can still watch my content. Anyway, James Gunn shares DCU filming plans after Superman's success. Again, they're talking about Superman being successful. Anyway, just because you say something that's not successful is successful, it doesn't make it fucking successful, Screen Rant. James Gunn opens up on future DC Universe movies and TV shows that are looking to start filming after Superman. Several DCU movies and TV shows are in various stages of development at DC Studios, along with Matt Reeves' The Batman universe, as a sequel is in the works with Robert Pattinson's Caped Crusader. With the success of the Superman movie again, they want to hammer it home to you, because basically if something is a failure and you keep on saying it's a success, maybe eventually people will believe it. The next DCU project that will keep expanding the franchise is Peacemaker Season 2, which is barely getting any views, by the way, on Max. With John Cena's DCEU character now becoming part of Gunn's reboot. However, as Gunn is also working on the next installment in the Superman saga. Yes, we've diverted from Gods and Monsters to the Superman saga. Because Superman brought in over $600 million globally, that's why they're doing this. But I'm interested to know how much involvement Superman's actually going to have in this movie, if any. Wouldn't that be funny if a Superman saga movie didn't have Superman in it? Watch this space. Anyway, that project is rapidly becoming a big priority at DC Studios. During a new appearance on the I Think You're Overthinking It podcast, Gunn was asked what is next for the DCU, as the DCU Studios co-CEO referenced the follow-up to Superman being the one that will likely start shooting in the near future, at least for his main continuity. While he expects the Batman 2 to be rolling before the Superman installment, Gunn gave the following updates on another DC Studios project. I can say that probably the next movie we're going to be making is the follow-up to Superman, which I don't want to get into too much detail on, but that's what probably the next film we're making. I think we're making the Batman 2 before that, hopefully, and I think it's the Superman follow-up. And then we have another TV show which nobody knows about, which is going next, and then a lot of the other stuff is still in different stages of development. We've got The Brave and the Bold is still going well. Is it? Is it? That's not what I'm hearing, James, but anyway. And Wonder Woman, and Paradise Lost, and Booster Gold. So all those other things are still going down the road. Some of the things have changed a little bit, more than a little bit, son. Like The Authority, but most of those things are all in process, but I'm not going to make any of them until there is a screenplay that I'm happy with. That's fair enough. But you can't keep on leaning back on that flag, son. Why announce things so early to look like you had a plan when you didn't? It's within the group of characters we already met, and Superman's an important element of it. So let's get this straight. It's within the group of characters we're already met, and Superman's an important element of it. Could this follow-up movie just be a Justice Gang fucking movie? Could it be a movie called The Justice Gang? It wouldn't fucking surprise me. Anyway, and he reckons we're going to be surprised about this follow-up, not if it's a Justice Gang movie, son. An important element of it. So that's what I'll say. But like that movie, that treatment is done. It's key to remember that while they have announced numerous movies and TV shows, not everything is going to be in the same development stage, as some projects have come further along than others. With the Brave and the Bold movie and a new Wonder Woman film for the DCU, those are obviously going to be a bigger priority for DC Studios. At the same time, projects like The Authority, which they have seemingly hit a creative obstacle, really? How does a man who, a story like The Authority is right in his roadhouse, reach a stumbling block? Anyway, will naturally, I don't think it's naturally, Andy, maybe remain on the back burner while allowing others that are closer to green light to be primary focuses. So don't worry about being honest, Andy. Don't worry about informing your readers and your audience properly like I do. Anyway, Based on Gunn's comments about that Superman follow-up, that means more updates could be on the way for that film sooner rather than later. And believe you me, everyone, I'll be here to tell you the truth about that reveal. Hearing Gunn's comments about what DCU and DC Studios projects are not close to filming, things are at least moving in the right direction for many of their movies and TV shows. Ideally, the projects that are perhaps taking longer to figure out will hopefully be able to land on the right creative track sooner rather than later. A massive upside, despite some films and series taking longer to come to fruition than others, this era of DC Studio has a more structured approach than fans have ever had with the DC Films division during the DCU. Let's read that again. I told you, right? Let's listen again. So let's read again what this propaganda merchant has said. This era of the DC Studios that he puts in bright black ink so we can see it, era of DC Studios has a more structured approach than fans ever had with the DC Films division during the DCEU. Let's get into that very fucking quickly, everyone. The truth is that James Gunn didn't have a real plan. He put his hand up his backside and he pulled out Gods and Monsters and said, what should I call? Oh, Brave and the Bold, yeah, we'll do that, yeah. Brave and the Bold, yeah. He came up with all these titles that most are on the back burner and not happening. Where is Brave and the Bold, Andy? Is it in development? Is it really being written? I don't fucking know. Let's look at the DCEU. After Man of Steel, they diverted away from Goyer and Nolan, and Zack basically made Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice. Then the plan was to do the Suicide Squad 2016, where Steppenwolf would kind of cameo to kind of link into Zack's Justice League plan. Then there was Wonder Woman, right? There was a plan, and then it was going to be Zack's Justice League. Then he had other plans where Ben Affleck was going to write and direct and star in a Batman movie. That fucking sounds pretty fucking structured to me, Andy! Doesn't that sound like structure to you, Andy? Of course. But when they fired Snyder, who had a plan and a structure and more of a plan and a structure than James Gunn, of course, there was no fucking structure, Andy. Do you get me? Hopefully, as 2025 gets closer to its end, more DCU updates will emerge about some of the biggest DC Studios projects that are coming up. So there's more propaganda for you, trying to make it seem like James Gunn has a plan and knows what he's doing. You don't realise how fucking OCD this geezer is. While I was reading that article, I could see, as I was moving, my Superman crest was getting creased. Nobody creases the Superman crest, not even me. Anyway, finally, this is my favourite Screen Rant article, because this is about one of my favourite comic book movies ever made. The film's called Man of Steel. I think you may have heard of it, about my favourite character in fiction. So from Screen Rant by someone called Nicholas something, that's not his surname, I just can't read his surname. 7 things Man of Steel did better than Superman. This will be interesting. Of course, I'm sure by the bottom of it, they'll say, we're not saying we didn't like Superman, blah, blah, blah. We know that. But anyway, let's give it a read. While James Gunn's Superman avoids many of Man of Steel's flaws. What flaws? What flaws has Man of Steel got? Now, I know everything made by human beings, as I always say, has flaws, but the flaws that you think the film has are probably not real flaws anyway. And explores other aspects of the hero. Zack Snyder's first DCU installment still has plenty of strengths that remain unmatched. James Gunn's Superman stays closer to its titular hero's traditional tone than Man of Steel, with a much more down-to-earth personality and more colourful world around Kal-El. David Corenswet portrays Superman as a more approachable hero who isn't afraid to come across as naive for the greater good. Let me tell you something. Henry Cavill's Clark and Superman is as naive. It's done in a different way, but when he talks, you can see that pureness and naivety when he talks to people, right? I can see that same naivety. But anyway. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel kicked off the DCEU on a much more controversial note than James Gunn's Superman. Are you sure about that? James Gunn's Superman launched the DCU. Man of Steel's dark-toned, serious Superman and dire depiction of metahumans divided audiences. That said, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel offered a unique take on Superman on the big screen, and many of its qualities are worth appreciating years later. Some iterations of Superman's parents care little about Earth and see it as a last resort for their species' survival, and others genuinely want Earth to be the inheritor of Krypton's legacy. Superman's most controversial plot point might be the El's apparent wish to send Kal-El to Earth as a conqueror instead of a savior. Now, what's interesting about that, Gunn deleted that moment from the digital home release, and I'm sure it'd be deleted from the physical media as well. So what are fans going to make of that? Does that mean you're not going with that anymore? This is what happens when you don't have a fucking plan, by the way, Mr. Andy from Screenrant. Anyway, while the DCU's bold take on Superman's Kryptonian parents seems inspired by Flashpoint Beyond, it isn't how Jor-El and Laura Van are usually depicted. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel makes it clear that Kal-El's Kryptonian parents truly believed their son could be Kryptonian's last hope and Earth's salvation. They fought to ensure Kal had free will, and Jor-El left Kal a codex that would later serve as his mentor. No, that's not what the codex is. The codex is actually the DNA of 1 billion Kryptonian life forms that are basically housed inside Kal-El, Superman, to be extracted at a later point. I mean, I don't think Jor-El really thought that through, but the whole point is so Krypton can go on. So that would have been an interesting sequel, but we didn't get it, I'm afraid, because the Codex wasn't anything to do with Snyder, it was Goya's idea. When Goya was fired, then that was the end of the Codex. And that's one thing that disappointed me about what Zack Snyder did and didn't do. I love the Snyderverse, but I'm sure it's, personally, I wouldn't want to watch someone creating content that doesn't, have a balance to their conversation. And I think Snyder should have continued the story of the Codex. Jor-El's final gift to Superman in Man of Steel might be one of the best descriptions of Kal-El's mission. You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Kal. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders. This is genius by David Goya. And actually, Snyder's plan implements this whole quote. Let's look at it again. You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. This is true. He does. They will race behind you. By the end of Man of Steel, they do race behind him. They will stumble. In Batman vs. Superman, they stumble and turn against him. Or they're divided. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Kal. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders. Unfortunately, because WB drove Snyder and Goya out, we will never see the people of Earth join Kal-El in the sun, and we will never see Kal-El help the people of Earth, human beings, accomplish wonders. How tragic is that? This is what Superman's all about. Don't tell me Gunn got it right with Superman's aura and Snyder and Goya got it wrong. That fucking quote is fucking beautiful. That quote is everything that Superman, this insignia, stands for. And you propaganda merchants can keep on talking your shit because it really doesn't matter. Man of Steel and Superman's reinvention of both sets of Superman's parents go against the traditional image of Jor-El and Laura Van, and Jonathan and Martha Kent, respectively. However, while controversial, they're both valid reinterpretations. The former presents a more distant kind of love from Pa Kent, and the latter underlines Superman's values in his decision to be more human than Kryptonian. Listen, Just because Costner's Pa Kent says maybe when young Clark says, what should I have done? Let them die, maybe. That's actually pure comic book Pa Kent. He cares about his son. Doesn't want his son to be a fucking lab rat. He's willing, it's a bit, it's not something you've heard Pa Kent say before, but do you think the other Pa Kents would be willing for other people to die for his own son? Survival. Think about it. Let it sink in for a minute, right? Anyway. Man of Steel's opening scene provides better context for the main plot. Man of Steel's original story remains the definitive movie origin for Superman. It's very, very good. But again, it's not a this or that for me. The origin in Superman 78 is also very beautiful. James Gunn's Superman summarises the titular hero's backstory in written form during his opening scene. This resource suits Superman's first DCU appearance. No, it doesn't. Reading something in a scroll is shit. Now, the way Lucas did it in Star Wars is totally different, and done in a more magnanimous way, clever way. The scroll in Superman is shit. I feel, what have I missed here? I've missed a fucking lot. But he was too lazy to make an origin movie. Anyway, in written form during his opening scene, this resource suits Superman's first DCU appearance perfectly, as Superman's origin has been adapted so many times that it would be redundant to reinterpret yet again. However, no. If I make a Robin Hood movie, I'm going to tell Robin Hood's story. If I make a Batman story, I'm going to tell his fucking story. Because normies don't know about Batman and Superman's and Robin Hood's origin stories. You may have assumed they do. You're fucking lazy. And this is what Superman lacks. It lacks a core foundation. It lacks a premise. It lacks emotional structure. That's the problem. And having a fucking dog and chasing after a dog doesn't give you an emotional foundation and structure. Since Superman's Kryptonian parents' twist portrays Jor-El and Lara as cold-hearted conquerors, Krypton's lack of screen time makes Superman's home planet even more detached from Superman's Earth story. And that's the problem. He doesn't really want to tell the Kryptonian story. And actually, Kryptonian stories, whether it be in Smallville or in comics, even in the Donner movie, have always been a strong foundation for Superman. Because he's not just a human being. His DNA is alien. And Gunn really wanted to distance himself from Krypton, probably for budgetary reasons. Meanwhile, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel emphasises the chaotic nature of Krypton's final moments, their importance in Superman's origins, Jor-El's desperate attempts to salvage Krypton's legacy, and General Zod's turn to evil are essential to Superman's first challenge as a superhero on Earth. Man of Steel's Krypton is also visually breathtaking. The hectic infighting during Krypton's last hour, combined with the planet's natural catastrophe, make Man of Steel's opening sequence feel like a top-tier, self-contained disaster movie, because that's what's happening to Krypton, and it's brilliant. It's not brilliant for Krypton, it's brilliant for us, the viewer. Krypton's destruction is always referred to as a tragedy, but few iterations of the event manage to capture its intensity. In Man of Steel's opening sequence, not a single Kryptonian wins. The Kryptonian Council meet their end after ignoring Jor-El's pleas. Jor-El and Lara realise that Krypton will die, and they'll soon lose their son. And Drew Zod can barely bear this frustration over being captured and sentenced, yet he acknowledges that Jor-El was right about the Council. Of course, Jor-El was right, but basically Jor-El and Zod agree about the destiny of Krypton and who's to blame for it, but Jor-El's actions are one of peace and wanting his son to live a full life and to help Earth, and for Kryptonians to be reborn on Earth, but in a peaceful way, without anybody dying. And Zod says, fuck the humans, let them fucking die, and let Kryptonians thrive. Basically, it's a very timely story when you look at all the flag shaggers out there and all the flag waving and the marches about illegal immigrants and all of that today. In fact, Zod versus Jor-El is a very timely story, isn't it now? Man of Steel shows a more realistic depiction of Superman's battles. Man of Steel's fight scenes have a lot of weight to them. Yes, they do. James Gunn's Superman highlights the titular hero's concern about minimising collateral damage, with David Conway's Superman even taking the time to save an individual squirrel while battling a fire-breathing kaiju. But how realistic is that? How believable? James Gunn's Superman fight scenes look like the fight scenes in Ben 10, and the fight scenes in Man of Steel are more reminiscent of a gladiator movie or something like that, because you're dealing with a god, which Gunn doesn't really doesn't see Superman as a god. And basically, it's not realistic for Superman to stop and save a fucking squirrel. It's just him trying to make a point against Snyder, the DCEU, and especially Man of Steel. While battling a fire-breathing kaiju, 12 years before Man of Steel's destructive final battle divided audiences, as Henry Cavill's Superman seemed to be oblivious of the damage done to Metropolis during his battle with Zod. Guess why he was oblivious, my friend? He was too busy fighting Zod! On the flip side, Superman's near-cataclysmic fight with Zod from Man of Steel shows what a superhero battle would actually look like in real life. Thousands of people would die, a tragic death, trapped in the rubble, and Superman would have to prioritise ending the threat before saving individual people. The sheer impact of each punch and each step from the Kryptonians is consistently destructive, so every time a building receives damage, the stakes rise for Metropolis. This is the mistake I think Goyer and Snyder did make. After Superman kills Zod, Superman should have flew back to the main streets of Metropolis, walking through it, seeing all the catastrophe that him and Zod caused, lifting up rubble and things like that. I think that would have been a great touch. I really do. But you actually see what the author of this article is trying to see in BVS. You see the after effects. But I think if Superman came back and helped after he killed Zod, I think people wouldn't have been so harsh on the movie. That's certainly what I would have done. Big Man of Steel fan, don't get it twisted. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice only improves what Man of Steel established in regard to Metropolis Black Zero event. Apart from the on-screen victims of the catastrophe, off-screen onlookers witnessed their offices and homes crumble with loved ones still inside. The DCEU's attention to detail is key in its accurate depiction of the history-defining event that could have been brushed off as a simple action sequence otherwise. Superman's first DCEU battle completely upends the world's perspective. Man of Steel's script is tighter than Superman's. No shit, Sherlock. Man of Steel is a more self-contained movie than Superman, as it should be. While it's quite action-packed, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel dedicates most of its screen time to exploring Superman's fears and doubts. Henry Cavill's Superman hesitates to reveal himself to the world burdened by Jonathan Kent's warnings about humanity's potential reaction. The DCEU Superman is deliberately portrayed as a more introspective hero before he becomes the charismatic symbol of hope he was born to be. James Gunn's Superman is accessible to all audiences. It's not. It really isn't. But it's better enjoyed if viewers have a firm grasp on DC mythology and understand the comic book origins of its many moving gears. So in other words, most people watching this film wouldn't have even had a clue on what's fucking going on. As a result, Snyder's Man of Steel can stand alone as an origin story, which is the whole point, with a complete emotional arc, while also logically explaining why Cavill's Superman in later appearances would carry a heavier, more solemn demeanour compared to traditional depictions. Meanwhile, James Gunn's Superman is accessible to all audiences. It's not, he's repeating himself again. But it's better enjoyed if viewers have a firm grasp. Have I just fucking read that? I'm going fucking mad, sorry. 3. Man of Steel's score is more emotional than Superman's. Let's be absolutely fucking clear here. Clear to a fucking day. Hans Zimmer is the fucking master. And Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel score is outstanding. He even dared to create a new theme for his Superman, and it's fucking great. And it fits perfectly to the tone of this Superman in the DCEU Snyderverse. It is brilliant. Now, if you look at this score from this Superman movie, they redo the Williams theme, which I adore, which is the anthem of Superman and superheroes, of course. But the whole point of Man of Steel is a contemporary take, not a nostalgia movie, and it's not about member berries. Anyway, Hans Zimmer's deliberately avoided referencing John Williams' legendary Superman theme for Man of Steel, opting instead for a new identity that reflected Clark Kent's gradual rise to heroism. Tracks like Flight, which are fucking brilliant, capture the awe of Superman's early days, while Krypton Destroyed and Arcade emphasised the film's epic scope. Each track in Man of Steel's score fully conveys the movie's themes and emotional beats. Listening to each track evokes every scene without needing to see a frame of the movie, which I did the other day, by the way. I can see it in my eyes. He's right. While the score adds new little motifs to flesh out every character and sequence, Superman's central musical identity is still anchored to an earlier cinematic era. And, you know, people ask why the Star Wars theme's always the same, so why does the Superman theme have to change? Because Star Wars is continuing in the same universe. Every time there's a Superman movie, apart from Superman Returns, it makes sense for Superman Returns, because Superman Returns is still Christopher Reeve's Superman, played by Brandon Routh. So that's fine. Fine. But when you're going to a new universe needs a new identity. The only reason they rejigged Williams' score is for nostalgia and member berries. And in the end, did it even actually work? I'll answer that question for you. No. James Gunn's Superman intentionally reuses and remixes part of the classic John Williams theme. This decision honours Superman's movie origins, but it also limits the 2025 movie's originality. There's no originality, is there? While the score adds new little... It's not me, it's them! They keep on putting up the same fucking thing. Sorry about that, everyone. It's not my fault. I'm not going mad. I'm mad, obviously, but not as mad as I thought I was. I don't like the way screenrant structure their articles anyway. Zimmer's Man of Steel score feels like an emotional companion to the film, rather than an accessory to capture Clark's journey from uncertainty to acceptance with a swelling. Percussive force that aligns perfectly with every other audiovisual element in the movie. That level of narrative musicality allows Man of Steel's score to stand on its own as a unique piece of art. Man of Steel, actually the Snyderverse feels like opera, doesn't it, in a way? In a way, you could have Zimmer's and Junkie XL's scores without any dialogue, and the film wouldn't be any lesser for it. That's what I love about Snyder's style of movies. Man of Steel's flying sequences are more epic than Superman's. No, let's go more honest about that. Man of Steel's flying sequences actually fucking look like they're flying, they're hardcore, and he found a new way to show how it would seem Superman's flying, with the kind of drag force and all of that. I still love what Donner did in Superman 78, the majestic way Superman flies, but that in any way doesn't reduce what Snyder achieved. But there's no point comparing the flying to Man of Steel to Superman, because the flying in Man of Steel is so much more superior. But there's no point comparing Superman with Man of Steel. It's fun to do this, but there's no point, because ultimately it's like comparing Shakespeare to the fucking Muppet Show. Since it's Clark Kent's origin story, Man of Steel presents Superman's flight as a central spectacle, both visually and emotionally. This is very true, and it works. Every takeoff triggers a sonic boom. The camera shakes, and Superman's cape and body react dramatically to his sudden stops and changes in direction in the middle of battle. Even after Superman masters this power, Man of Steel continues to emphasize the physical intensity of his movements, and of course Hans Zimmer's soaring score complements these moments perfectly. This is what you call cinema, everyone. And we've gone somewhere else with cinema. Cinema doesn't feel like cinema anymore. Superman's flight moments in James Gunn's Superman are also spectacular. No, they're fucking not. I told you they would do this on the top of this article, didn't I? I told you. They would try and still compliment what Gunn's doing because they ain't got no fucking teeth or guts. But they take a narrative back seat. Gunn's Superman spends more time showcasing Superman's creative fight moves and his interactions with other heroes, while Superman's flight is still powerful. It's treated as a familiar ability rather than in-universe wonder. After all, Superman's exploration of his Kryptonian powers must have happened within the 3 years we didn't see anything. That's no good, is it? That's no good to an audience member. With the 3 years between his first public appearance and the events of the movie, or even before that. I'll tell you what Gunn should actually do. Make an origin story, make an origin movie of his Superman movie. I think that might actually go down well, because I think we missed way too much. Michael Shannon's General Zod is more scarier than Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. Let's not get it twisted, let's get it clear. Michael Shannon's General Zod is the best comic book movie villain there will ever be on the big screen, or ever has been at the very least. I don't know what they'll create next, so that's not fair. But I've critiqued and I've criticised Gunn for going with Luthor. Lex Luthor is the main villain. Total mistake. Nicholas Hoult does what's on the page. It's not Nicholas Holt's fault. Nicholas Hoult is a great actor. I still think it's a miscast, but I think, yeah, he ain't a great Lex, and he ain't a great threat, and he ain't a great villain because he's badly written. If it was up to Hoult, we would have seen a better version of that character. But Lex Luthor was totally wrong for the main villain. Yes, we did that in Superman 78, and it kind of worked. But we've gone beyond that now. The audience has become more sophisticated. Superman stories have become more sophisticated. But Michael Shannon's General Zod has aura, he has depth, and he has a reason. He's not evil. This article depicts him as evil. He's not actually evil. He's a guy who's seen his planet wiped out through poor governmental decisions. Basically, his planet turning their backs on exploration, as Jor-El catalogues. He's angry, and he's fighting for the survival of his people. So Michael Shannon's General Zod is way scarier than Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. Michael Shannon's Zod deserves a spot among the best comic book movie performances of all time. And even though this is screenrant, you have to give them a round of applause for that. Man of Steel's General Zod could have easily come across as a standard evil antagonist. But Michael Shannon infuses the villain with visible anguish and desperation. Zod is not a conqueror by personal ambition, but a product of Kryptonian genetic engineering, which he couldn't change even if he wanted to. Michael Shannon's performance communicates Zod's unstoppable nature through his intense delivery, which goes from intimidating to downright terrifying. Imagine bringing in Michael Shannon to do this. And I don't think Shannon would have done this if it was one-dimensional, but I think Shannon saw the script from Goya and was very impressed. To play a monster of a villain with no possibility of redemption and still convey complexities in a high-octane superhero movie is a feat few actors can boast. Despite his rigid sense of duty, General Zod genuinely embraces his role as Earth's destroyer. Zod's hatred for Jor-El and Kal-El is a personal grudge. He holds on top of his life's singular purpose. He doesn't hate Jor-El, by the way. And you see his body language when he kills Jor-El. He regrets it. They were friends. So he doesn't hate Jor-El at any point. But him and Jor-El disagree on the best way to continue the lineage of the Kryptonians. There's not hate. I don't think he hates Superman or Kal-El either. They're on the opposite spectrum. They have to fight. They have to stop each other. I don't think it's about hatred. I think this guy's got that wrong. And I don't think it's a personal grudge. He holds on top of his life's singular purpose. And when he realizes that there's no possibility of winning Zod's realization that he no longer has a reason to exist is visibly painful. Like Heath Ledger's Joker and William Dafoe's Green Goblin, Zod is undeniably malevolent. Yet Shannon also conveys moments of deep personal torment. He does, and they're amazing. Michael Shannon's nuanced performance also reframes Superman's controversial decision to kill Zod. In Man of Steel's climax, Superman recognizes that Zod is following the only purpose he knows, meaning that there's no peaceful resolution. Zod's cruelty is hardwired into his very being, which justifies Superman's heartbreaking choice to end his life. That's not why Superman kills him. Superman kills him because he's got no choice, so he's going to fry that poor family with his heat vision. Within the story, Superman has no choice. But David Goyer had a choice whether to have Superman kill him or not. And that's my issue with the situation. When you've got such a great villain, we saw that Shannon was willing to come back to the Flash movie, which was shit. Surely, I mean, I had a better sequel story, a continuation for Zod, where Zod and Superman are all banished into the Phantom Zone. Meanwhile, in the sequel, Brainiac arrives, takes over the world, and then Zod and Superman have to unite. They escape the Phantom Zone and they fight Brainiac together. And then Zod sacrifices himself to save Kal-El's life. To me, that's a beautiful ending for someone who was once fighting Superman. That's how my stories go. They're more interesting. So no, the reason I don't agree with the killing of Zod, as well as I don't want to see Superman breaking someone's neck as violently as that, there could have been a more peaceful way of killing him. But it's not just that. There was so much more potential in this character, in this villain, and this actor's portrayal. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, there's no peaceful resolution. Zod's cruelty is hardwired into his very being, which justifies Superman's heartbreaking choice to end his life. To play a monster of a villain with no possibility of redemption and still convey complexities in a high-octane superhero movie is a feat few actors can boast. I can't believe this video has gone beyond 50 minutes. If you've stayed for the whole video, I thank you greatly. But here's my final piece of today's video. You know, the debate over light stories, over dark stories, grounded characters, over more bright and inspirational characters have been a debate since people sat around the fire and told each other yarns and stories. For me, there's not really much of a debate. You can have darker stories, more grounded characters. You can have a more grounded version of Superman and a more cartoony version of Superman if you want. But both things have to be done properly, and they have to be, at the very least, believable. And as I said reading those articles, when James Gunn's Superman is fighting, when James Gunn's Superman's, fighting, and there's a moment when there's all these people he's got to fight, and it just looks like a cartoon. It just looks like Ben 10. Now, this was a purposeful intention by James, but for me, it doesn't work. And as that article said, when you watch Superman and Zod fighting, there's a reality, they've got powers and they're in the air fighting and all of that, but it feels like a brutal grudge match. And that's what's beautiful about it. As Zach described it, it's kind of a superheroes having a bar brawl or something. And that's how Zack Snyder saw that third act. Look, as I said, there's no point comparing Superman with Man of Steel. But the debate about dark, grounded stories and lighter stories that don't have any depth to them is an interesting debate to have. You always want meaning within your stories. You always want, to feel, your emotions to be uplifted. You want to laugh, you want to cry, you want to feel it. You want to feel what your hero's going through. And you certainly do that in Man of Steel. In Superman, I really didn't feel anything. I felt like the filmmaker was just going through the motions. And the point about Superman barely flying in the Superman movie, there's a reason for that. Because the director doesn't know how to do good flying. That's one of the reasons the film crashes and burns. The flying isn't brilliant. It's bad. And the flying in Man of Steel is very revolutionary and inventive, of course, using CGI and the up-to-date technology. One of Man of Steel's greatest qualities is that when you watch it today, it feels like you've walked into the cinema and you're watching a brand new movie. Because the truth is, the CGI we're seeing in Man of Steel hasn't really been used and implemented in many films. It's not of that quality. That's crazy, because Zack Snyder takes CGI and uses it as a paintbrush. Man of Steel will go along for many, many years and will be remembered and beloved for being a brilliant, new age, revolutionary, contemporary take at Superman. That's why it's going to stand the test of time. And James Gunn's Superman won't.